Today we're going to look at combining like terms. First of all, let's talk about what does it mean to be like terms. To be like terms, you must have the same variable with the same exponent. So looking at problems 1, 2, 3, and 4, which one would match with A, B, C, or D as far as like terms? Notice in problem number 1, we have 3x. Which other problem just has x with it? So wouldn't number 1 go with C? So those are considered like terms because they both have the same letter with the same exponent. So those are considered like each other or like terms. What about number 2? Do you see a term in A, B, or C, or D where it is a y squared? This one has an x squared. It's not a y squared. If it was 5y squared, then it would match, and they would be considered like terms. But the variable is different. This one has this one has a y squared, but it also has an x. So that doesn't match. So not this one, and definitely not that one. So this number 2 doesn't have anything to pair up. It doesn't have any like terms to pair up with. In number 3, what do you think would be like number 3 in letters A, B, C, or D? Notice how this is the x is squared. And notice how this one, the x is also squared. So it has the same letter with the same exponent. So these two are considered like terms. So those two match, they go together. And then what about number 4? Notice how this one has the x is squared and the y is just plain old y. It's actually y to the first power. So x squared y. And here we have an x, but it's not squared. So it has to be x squared y. This one, the exponents do not match the variables. So it doesn't go with D. This is the one that has the same letter x being squared and y. So these two go together. So that's what we mean by when we're talking about like terms. They must have the same variable with exactly the same exponent to be considered like each other. Where we're simplifying expressions by combining like terms. So do you see in this problem we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms? And of those terms, which ones are considered like each other? So notice that we have a 4x squared and a 6x squared. So 4x squared and 6x squared have the same letter with the same exponent. So those are like each other. Then we have just a 3x. There is no other term like that term in the problem. And then we have what we call constants. These are numbers that are plain old numbers and do not have any letters, and those are called constants. So we have a -8 and a -2. So we want to combine each of our like terms. So we have 4x squared and 6x squareds. So we have 10x squareds, right? 4x squared and 6x squared gives us 10x. Plus we have 3x's, and then we also need to add our constants. So a -8 plus a -2 means we have a minus or a -10. So our final answer is this one. We could have also written as our answer as plus a -10. So these are both correct. However, when we're writing final answers, instead of writing plus a negative, we want to go back to just writing the equivalency, which is -10. That way we don't have so many different multiple symbols in our final answer. So you're basically just taking the terms that are like each other and combining them. Now our final answer, we want to put what's called standard form, which means we want the term that has the highest exponent to be written first, then the term with the lower exponent, and we always want the constant to be written last. So this is called standard form, where we have the highest exponent, then the next, and then the constant always written last. Here is another problem. Notice in problem number 2, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So we're going to combine those like terms. So we have 3y's and we have negative 8y's. So 3y and a negative 8y, and we're going to combine or add those terms together. And then the constants are the ones that have no letters, again, are called constant terms. We have a negative 8 and a positive 4, and we're going to add those terms together. So how many y's do we have? If we have a positive 3 with a negative 8, doesn't that give me a negative 5y? And the constant is a negative 8 plus a positive 4. So isn't that a negative 4? So we're going to write minus 4. So that's the answer you should have. In problem number 3, how many terms do you see? I see 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. In this particular problem, we have variables, x's and y's. When you have multiple variables, you want to write them alphabetically. So therefore, we are going to start with the x's. Remember, when you're writing, your constants terms should always go last. So remember, if it doesn't have a variable, that is called a constant term, and we always write those last. So let's look at our x's. We have a negative 3x in this problem and a negative 7x, and we're going to add those terms together. Then we have a positive 9y and a negative 3y. So a positive 9y with a negative 3y, and we're going to add those terms together. So a negative 3x and plus a negative 7x's, wouldn't that give me a negative 10x? And a positive 9y added a negative 3, isn't 9 plus a negative 3, wouldn't that give me a positive 6y? So our final answer for this problem is negative 10x plus 6y. That would be our final answer when you combine the x's and then you combine the y's. Now, something that's good to know is the number that's being multiplied to the variable is called a coefficient. So the coefficient of the x term is negative 10. Here, the coefficient of this y term is a 6. Here, the coefficient of this y term is a negative 8. Here, the coefficient is a negative 7. So understanding the word coefficient is important, and then also understanding how many terms are in a sentence. So again, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Terms are separated with adding and subtraction symbols. And let's look at one more problem. So again, how many terms do you see? I see 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. We have terms that both have x's and y's in them. We can only combine terms that are like each other. Since there's multiple letters, we're going to do them alphabetically. So here we have a negative 5x, plus we have another x. And then we're going to combine our y's. So we have a positive 3y and a negative 7y, and we're going to combine those. So we're going to add those like terms. X implies that you have one x. So when it just says x, that implies one x. So a negative 5 plus a positive 1, doesn't that give us negative 4 x's? And then a positive 3 plus a negative 7, doesn't that give us negative 4 y's? So that is your answer. So this was meant to be a very short video on just about what are like terms and how to combine like terms.